Well, let me tell you about our next guest. Paul Jensen has written a book entitled Over the Edge into Truth. It's a miracle story, and let me just go ahead and tell you that he is giving this book away free. So we're going to put up his contact information because you're going to want to get the book. But let me tell you a little bit about Paul. He is currently the Director of Business Development for Microsoft's Xbox Live. Now, a lot of you are going to want to get that for Christmas for yourself or for your kids. He's also served as the president of 2 casual game companies and vice president of Sony Pictures Digital. So he worked in Hollywood as well. So, welcome. First of all, Paul, God bless you from Seattle.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And let's get right into this in the interest of time. Tell us about your miracle.
Sure. My miracle happened about 6.5 years ago while I was vacationing in Palm Springs. I've got my whole family, and my sister and her husband and their family go out to Joshua Tree National Park, which is a beautiful place out in the desert. I went bouldering with my son up to about 75 feet up off the desert floor.
Bouldering.
Bouldering. Which
I've never heard that term.
It's not truly rock climbing because I didn't have a helmet and ropes, but I was just kind of climbing just up boulders up to a certain height, about 75 feet up.
And how old is your son at the time?
He was 7.
7.
And I ended up at that flat spot being swept off my feet and landed with my knees smacking a rock. I split it open. I went to a side a steep cliff, the side that I had not climbed up on, but the side where my brother-in-law, my wife, and my sister were. And I yelled down there to get my brother-in-law, Todd, come up here and get my son down. At that point, I started feeling very dizzy. So I walked clear away from the edge, many, many feet away from the edge, and I put my hands on my knees and I stared at the ground because I thought, uh-oh, if I pass out, I'm going to fall flat here. Well, I did pass out. But instead of falling flat, I have to go switch now to my wife's perspective and my sister's. They saw me launch off that cliff doing a dead somersault in the air and then landing 45 feet or 4.5 stories down onto essentially straight rock.
Oh. And you landed on your head.
I landed head first, yes. They saw me fall all the way down until the last couple feet. Their vision was obscured because they were still on the desert floor. I landed about 30 feet up. My wife and my sister took off running for me. They thought I was dead. My wife was the first one to get to me. She saw me. Ironically, the side that has the dent in its head, I don't know if you can see this, but it's got a dent, that was butterflied open. You could see about this much of my skull.
Wait, can I zoom in and I want you to see the scar on his head.
If I go like this, you can see the scar.
I'm sure your wife has never called you a knothead, has she?
She's called me stubborn, that's for sure.
Okay.
My wife thought I didn't have an arm. My left eye was because it was so far behind my body because I was kind of wedged upside down. I didn't roll. I didn't bounce and roll. I just went whack. And my wife picked me up thinking I was dead, and she heard me breathe. She found my arm, and she was like, "Oh, he's not dead." And I came to, 45 seconds or a minute or so after that, to my sister who had wrapped her shirt around my head. She was rocking me saying, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." And, so I was there for about 2 hours. I had about 50 people come to help me. I had a train about 30 people bring me on the desert floor, brought me to Palm Springs. I had my first helicopter ride. And when I was treated as a trauma patient, they did the full body CAT scans, everything you can imagine. And I was laying on that bed after they'd stitched up my head. All these people started coming to my bedside looking at my chart, a lot of people. And I got concerned. I said, well, what's happening? What's going on? And they said, well, haven't you heard? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, they're calling you Miracle Boy. And I didn't feel like Miracle Boy because I obviously had a beat up face. And I said, why? And they said, you have no broken bones. You have no internal injuries. Your skull is not fractured. In fact, your brain waves don't even represent trauma. They said, you have great insurance, but quite frankly, you're not sick enough to stay at the hospital at night, so you're free to go.
Amazing.
So
wow. So I mean, in looking at that, I mean, obviously that is miraculous. No one could fall that far and not most of the time be killed. And so, I mean, with spiritual eyes, do you believe that there was, I mean,
I believe
there was an angel there that helped soften the flow? I mean, what do you think happened? Did the Lord ever show you?
Yes, through a lot of teaching, a lot of pain and suffering and perseverance, I was kind of learning through the process what happened. And first the EMTs who were there, who after I had left said, drop 100 people off where I fell, 100 people die. I should not have lived. I went back there 3.5 years to look at the spot I'd fallen. There's no way I could survive, let alone not have fractured my entire body to escape what I had done. You know, I had as a child, had been a very Christian person up to the age of about 16. In fact, I thought I was going to be a missionary. And then through peer pressure, moves, etc., I ended up leaving that path, and I became a very big man of the world, a very big partier, somebody who was immersed in everything you could imagine, media, you name it. And I came back to God about 3 weeks before that miracle. And when I was there, you know, I believe God's protective covering was removed from me. For that short period of time, I was launched off that cliff. I didn't fall. There's no physical explanation to understand how I could launch off a cliff when I'm passed out. But there's also no physical explanation that the final impact, the thing that should have absolutely shattered my body and killed me, it was like I was caught on a pillow and saved. So I truly believe that I am a documented modern-day miracle.
I want to tell this real quickly. I don't know if I've ever told this public or if our staff has ever heard this, and Gary, you'll find this interesting. When we came to Dallas and we finally started building the first station for Daystar, we were having a tower built in North Dallas, and a call came to my home and said one of the tower workers, or two of the tower workers, have fallen from 300 feet, and they have fallen on big granite rocks. We had a Jewish stone cutter, of all things. Here's Joel with us today.
Yeah.
This guy made statues and monuments and headstones, and they said they're dead. And of course, you can imagine how I felt. But then later, they were taken to the hospital, and then later we found out they weren't dead. But one of them had a dream later, and he said, I dreamed that as I fell off the tower, I fell into the lap of an angel.
And this wasn't, and you have to understand, for those who understand about guys who work on towers for the most part, and they did not.
They were rough, tough guys.
I mean,
and we led one of them and his girlfriend
towers
to the Lord. They sued everybody around except us. It was a miracle.